I was really looking forward to that camping trip with my best friend. We had been planning it for weeks. We packed everything the night before, ready to head out early in the morning. But right when I was getting ready to leave, he called me, said he couldn't come. His parents had some kind of emergency and he had to go help them. I was disappointed, yeah, but I figured, why not go by myself? I had everything ready, and I'd been to that campsite a million times before. What's the worst that could happen? So I grabbed my stuff and headed out. It's a pretty secluded spot, you know? About 30 minutes off the dirt road, deep in the forest. No one else goes there, which is exactly why we liked it. Quiet, peaceful, just nature and you. I decided to stay just for a night and then head back in the morning. It sounded like a good plan at the time. The drive was uneventful, just the usual bumpy roads, trees whipping past, and the sun shining down. I felt pretty good about the whole thing. I got to the spot, parked the car, and set up camp like I always did. Tent went up, fire pit cleared, the usual routine. Everything was normal. After setting up, I figured I'd do a little exploring. There's this stream nearby, not too far from the camp. The sound of the water is always kind of soothing. Anyway, as I'm walking down toward the stream, I notice something weird. There's this black pair of pants just lying there by the water, like someone had left them behind. I didn't think much of it. Maybe some hiker got wet and just ditched them. But then, a little further along, hanging from a tree, I see a black shirt. It's just swaying there in the breeze. It gave me a weird feeling, but I shrugged it off. People leave stuff behind all the time, right? I head back to camp. The sun's starting to dip a bit, casting long shadows through the trees. I start getting that feeling, you know, when everything seems a little too quiet, like the whole forest was holding its breath or something. I figured it was just me being alone. Anyway, I'm sitting by the fire, trying to shake off that weird feeling when I see something. Movement. Off in the distance, just beyond the trees. I squint, trying to get a better look. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something, but no, it's a person, a man. He's just standing there, his back to me, staring off into the trees. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe another camper. But this guy wasn't moving, just standing still, not even glancing in my direction. The more I looked, the weirder it got. He was wearing a black shirt and pants, kind of like the ones I found earlier. I waved, trying to get his attention, but he didn't react, just stood there. Then, without warning, he bends down, picks up a stick from the ground, and starts hitting himself in the head with it. At first I was like, "Cool, what the hell?" I called out to him, asked if he needed help. No response. He just kept hitting himself over and over. Thud, thud, thud. It wasn't like he was hurting himself, though. More like, I don't know, like he was in a trance or something. I kept watching, unsure of what to do. Should I go over there? Should I leave? But before I could make up my mind, he stopped. Just like that. Then he walked off into the trees. I was left sitting there by the fire, heart pounding in my chest. That wasn't normal. I know it wasn't, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe the guy had issues. Maybe he was just some weirdo wandering the forest. Either way, I didn't see him again after that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the fire was the only thing keeping me company. But then, sometime after I crawled into my tent, I heard it. Footsteps. Not the soft kind, like an animal creeping through the underbrush. No, these were heavy, deliberate, human. They circled around the campsite, slow and steady. I held my breath, listening as they got closer, then faded away, only to return again. I didn't dare move, didn't dare unzip the tent to see who or what was out there. The footsteps stopped eventually, and everything went silent again. But I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I wasn't alone, that someone or something was watching me. I stayed awake for hours, just listening, too scared to move. When I finally did drift off, it wasn't long before I was jolted awake by a new sound. It was faint, but unmistakable. Whispering. At first I thought it was just the wind, but it grew louder, more distinct. Voices murmuring just outside the tent. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could feel the malice in their tone. I lay there, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. When morning finally came, I was exhausted. The light creeping into the tent was a bit of a relief, so I forced myself to get up, hoping that daylight would bring some sense of normalcy back. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, rubbing my eyes and taking in the fresh air, or at least I thought it would be fresh. But then I saw it. Right by my fire pit from the night before, the same black pant I had seen near the stream. It was just lying there, like someone had dropped it next to my campfire. And this time, the smell. Oh man, the smell hit me like a punch to the gut. It was this thick, rotting stench, like something had been dead for days. I gagged, stumbling backward, nearly vomiting right then and there. I don't know what came over me, but I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. Like whatever that thing was, it wasn't just some old discarded pant. I didn't even want to touch it. I mean, it looked normal enough, worn out, but normal. But the smell was so bad it made my eyes water, and the air around it felt heavy, like it was suffocating me. I stood there, staring at it for what felt like forever, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. How the hell did it get here? It wasn't there when I went to bed. I was sure of it. And even if it was, where did that smell come from? It was so bad I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before. I didn't want to be there anymore. I packed up my stuff as fast as I could, leaving the pant where it was. There was no way I was sticking around to figure out what was going on. I started packing up my stuff, my hands shaking a little as I stuffed everything into my bag. But just as I was zipping up the tent, I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. It was coming from the trees nearby, something between a howl and a scream. I can't even describe it exactly, but it was so disturbing, it sent shivers down my body. It wasn't an animal, at least not any animal I've ever heard before. It was this long, drawn-out wail that seemed to echo through the entire forest, almost like something in pain, but angry too. I froze for a second, listening. The sound was getting louder, coming closer. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my gut was telling me to get out of there as fast as I could. Whatever was making that noise, I didn't want to stick around to find out. I grabbed the rest of my stuff, practically throwing it into my car. I didn't care if I was leaving something behind. I just wanted to be gone. The howl scream kept going like it was watching me. When I finally got into my car and slammed the door shut, the sound stopped. Just like that. Dead silence. I didn't even look back. I floored it out of there. I'm telling you, that drive back felt like it took forever. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something or someone following me. But after a while, the farther I got from the woods, the lighter I started to feel. Anyway, I got home, took a long shower, and tried to forget about it. But that night, that's when things got weird again. I don't know if it was just because I was freaked out, but I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking about that guy in the woods, the way he stood there, not moving, just staring off into space. The sound of him hitting his head with that stick kept replaying in my mind over and over. Thud, thud, thud. I finally fell asleep, but it wasn't peaceful, man. It was one of those nights where your dreams don't make sense, but still freak you out. I kept dreaming I was back at the campsite, but everything was different. The trees were taller, darker, and I could hear those footsteps again circling the tent. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart racing. The room was dark, the house was silent, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I wasn't alone. I turned on the light, tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just a nightmare. For a while, things went back to normal. I didn't think much about that camping trip, just chalked it up to a creepy experience and moved on. But then, weird things started happening around the house. It was little stuff at first, like I'd put something down and come back later and it'd be in a different spot. I know, it sounds dumb. People misplace things all the time, but this was different. I wasn't just losing track of stuff, I was sure things were being moved. I'd come back from work and find my keys in the kitchen, even though I knew I'd left them on the coffee table. Or I'd leave the lights off when I left the house, and when I got home, they'd be on. Little things like that, things that make you doubt yourself, you know? But then it started getting worse. One night I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard it. Footsteps, not outside but inside the house. They were slow, deliberate, just like the ones I heard at the campsite. At first I thought it was my imagination, but then they got closer. They started at the far end of the hallway and made their way toward my room. I sat up in bed, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting, listening. Nothing. For what felt like hours, I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. But it didn't. Everything went quiet again. The next morning, I convinced myself I was just hearing things. Maybe I'd been more shaken up by that camping trip than I thought. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. A few nights later, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they didn't stop outside my door. They came into my room. I couldn't see anything, nothing was there, but I could feel it. The air got heavy, like someone was standing over me watching. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't move. I didn't even dare open my eyes. I just lay there, frozen, waiting for whatever it was to go away. Eventually, the feeling passed and the footsteps faded, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I started avoiding being home at night after that. I'd stay out late, go to friends' places, just anything to keep from being alone in that house. But every time I came back, I'd get that same feeling, like I was being watched. I'd hear things at night, see shadows out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there'd be nothing there. It was driving me crazy. One night, after another round of footsteps, I decided I'd had enough. I was going to stay up and catch whatever it was. I grabbed a flashlight, sat in my living room, and waited. The house was silent, the clock ticking loudly in the background. I kept my eyes on the hallway, waiting for the sound of those footsteps again. And then, just after midnight, I heard it. That same slow, deliberate sound coming down the hallway. I turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the door, but there was nothing there. The footsteps kept coming closer and closer, but I couldn't see anything. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I got up and started walking toward the sound. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but I had to know, I had to see what it was. I reached the hallway, shining the light down the empty corridor. The footsteps were right in front of me now, so close I could almost feel the floorboards creaking beneath them. And then, they stopped. For a second, everything was silent. I stood there, frozen, flashlight in hand, barely breathing. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. A figure standing just beyond the light, in the shadows. It was the man from the campsite, the one who had been hitting himself with the stick. But this time, his face, man, I swear, it was like it was melting. His skin was sagging, drooping down in these weird, lumpy folds. But the worst part, he was looking right at me, and through all that mess I could still see this hint of a smile, just a faint curl of his lips, like he was amused by the whole thing. His eyes, though, those were locked on me, like he was waiting for something. I froze. I didn't know what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest so hard I thought it might explode. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to get the hell out of there, but I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at this thing, as it stared back at me with that melting face and that creepy little smile. And then just like that, he was gone. I don't even remember what happened next. One second he was there, the next he wasn't. I think I just bolted. I ran out of the house and drove around for hours, too freaked out to go back. When I finally did go home, the house felt cold, empty. I barely stayed in that house long after. I ended up moving out a few weeks later, and I haven't had any more encounters since. And I swear, man, when I close my eyes, I can still see that face, that weird, melting face with that twisted little smile. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, check out more of my videos on the screens above or visit my channel for even more. Don't forget to subscribe for future updates. Stay safe and take care.